Have you ever walked away from a conversation thinking, "Why did I say that?" Not because you lied or meant harm, but because deep down you knew silence would have served you better. In a world that celebrates quick wit and louder voices, we often forget the quiet strengths of restraint. The Stoics knew this well. To them, wisdom wasn't in saying more, it was in saying less, but meaning more. Truly intelligent men, they don't speak to impress. They speak with purpose, or not at all. And what they never say tells you more about their character than any polished speech ever could. Today, through the lens of Stoic thought and real human behavior, we're exploring 7 things wise men avoid saying, not out of fear, but from a deeper understanding. Some words diminish us the moment they leave our lips. You might find yourself in some of these, and that's a good thing. It means you're paying attention. So, take a breath, settle in, and if something here resonates with you, stay a while. Wisdom isn't loud, but it's always listening. Number 1. I already know that. It's a phrase that slips out more often than we care to admit. I already know that. On the surface, it sounds confident, even competent, but underneath, it signals something far more limiting: a closed mind. An intelligent man knows better. He understands that the moment we believe there's nothing left to learn, we've slammed the door on growth. That phrase, subtle as it may seem, is not a mark of wisdom. It's a quiet declaration of arrogance. I learned this the hard way. Years ago, I was working with a mentor named Alan, a man who carried himself with quiet certainty, not because he had something to prove, but because he had nothing to prove. We were going over a process I had done dozens of times. As he began offering his insight, I reflexively cut him off. "Yeah, I know that already." He paused. No anger, no lecture, just a calm, heavy look. Then he moved on, but the weight of that moment landed later. I hadn't just interrupted a lesson. I had robbed myself of the chance to see through his eyes. Alan had lived through things I hadn't, made mistakes I hadn't yet faced, and noticed details I still overlooked. And all of that, years of experience, was available to me if I'd only listened. The Stoics knew this trap well. Marcus Aurelius warned, "You cannot learn anything when you think you already know everything." It's the ego that convinces us we're standing on solid ground, when in truth, we're precariously balancing on pride. The desire to appear competent becomes the very thing that blocks true competence. Knowledge isn't a trophy you earn and shelve. It's a river, ever moving, ever changing. You may step into the same water twice, but it's never the same stream, and neither are you. I once witnessed a beautiful moment between an old craftsman and a young apprentice. The apprentice was explaining a technique, something the older man had likely mastered decades ago, but the craftsman listened intently, nodded, even asked a question. When I later asked him why he didn't just say, "I already know that," he smiled and said, "Because sometimes you don't learn from the information, you learn from how someone else sees it." That's real intelligence. It's not loud. It doesn't need to interrupt or impress. It listens, it absorbs, it remains curious. So the next time you feel that reflex rise, the urge to say, "I've heard this before," pause, breathe, listen anyway, not because the person speaking knows more than you, but because you might catch something new, a shift in perspective, a subtle nuance, a single insight that could deepen your understanding. And even if you don't, you've practiced humility, you've shown respect, and over time, that makes you someone worth listening to. In Stoic philosophy, we call this mastery of the self, the ability to quiet your ego in favor of clarity. The the strength to remain a student, even when you're the teacher in the room. Because growth isn't about arriving, it's about continuing. In the end, intelligence isn't found in knowing everything. It's found in knowing that you don't, that you never will, and choosing to show up, listen, and learn anyway. That's not weakness, that's wisdom, and it's the kind of intelligence that never stops evolving. Number 2, that's impossible. Years ago, I worked with a man named Victor. Sharp mind, impressive resume, the kind of person who carried responsibility like armor, never flinching, never cracking. But there was one phrase he used often, too often: that's impossible. It sounded reasonable at first, cautious, responsible even. Whenever someone proposed a bold idea, breaking into a new market, rethinking a broken system, taking on a difficult client, Victor shut it down with those 2 words. But over time, I saw the pattern. He wasn't describing reality, he was describing his own limitations. That's impossible wasn't about the challenge itself. It was about fear. The fear of failure, of uncertainty, of being wrong, of trying and falling short. The Stoics knew this kind of fear well. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Victor wasn't dealing with facts. He was wrestling shadows cast by his own mind. And like many men, he wore that fear well, disguised as logic, as practicality. But at its core, it was paralysis, self-imposed. Stoicism teaches us that the real obstacle is never the thing in front of us. It's the way we see the thing. When we label something impossible, we're not measuring its weight. We're revealing our own strength, or lack of it. Years later, I joined a project that, on paper, had every reason to fail. Low budget, tight timeline, inexperienced team. The kind of situation that invites doubt. But instead of echoing Victor's reflex, I asked a different question. What can I do today? What's the next step, no matter how small? We didn't defy gravity. We didn't achieve the miraculous. But step by step, obstacle by obstacle, we delivered. Because we didn't surrender to the size of the mountain, we just kept climbing. Marcus Aurelius said it clearly. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. An intelligent man understands this. He doesn't confuse difficulty with defeat. He knows that impossible often just means unfamiliar. That courage isn't loud, it's quiet, persistent. The decision to try again and again, even when the outcome is uncertain. Stoic courage isn't reckless optimism, it's disciplined resilience. The will to act, even when the odds are against you. To move forward, not because success is guaranteed, but because stagnation is worse. When a man says, "That's impossible," he closes the door on himself. But when he takes one small step forward, he opens doors others never even notice. And that's not just intelligence, that's wisdom, forged in motion. Number 3, that's not my fault. Few phrases are as quietly destructive as this one. That's not my fault. It rolls off the tongue easily, especially when things fall apart, at work, in a relationship, or just in life. In the moment, it feels justified, like self-defense. But the Stoics would tell us, every time we push away responsibility, we also push away our power. An intelligent man knows that responsibility isn't the same as blame. It's about influence, and if we refuse to take ownership of even a small part, we remove ourselves from the possibility of shaping the outcome. I remember a story from years ago. A friend of mine, Daniel, lost a major client. The fallout was big. When we spoke, he was quick to point fingers. The client had been unreasonable. The market was unstable. His team had dropped the ball. All of it had truth to it. But while Daniel defended himself, something else slipped through his fingers, the opportunity to grow. He stayed locked in the same habits, the same blind spots, and the pattern repeated. What Daniel didn't see was this. By refusing to own even a fraction of the problem, he handed over the only thing he truly had: control over himself. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That's the Stoic cornerstone. When we say, "That's not my fault," we put the power to fix things in someone else's hands. We wait for them to change, to apologize, to do better. But when we ask instead, "What was my part in this?" we take the wheel. We move from passive to active, from victim to builder. In my own life, I've seen this truth unfold. Owning my role, even when it was small, always gave me clarity. Maybe I didn't communicate clearly enough. Maybe I should have asked tougher questions, set stronger boundaries, or prepared more thoroughly. The point isn't to beat yourself up, it's to grow. And that willingness to reflect, to take responsibility, builds something far stronger than fault. It builds trust with others and with yourself. Blame is easy. Responsibility, that's where real strength lives. The Stoics didn't teach us to avoid difficulty. They taught us to rise above it. And rising begins with a single question. What can I do better next time? That's how intelligent men lead, not by pointing fingers, but by stepping forward. Not by defending their ego, but by cultivating their character. And if this speaks to you, let me know in the comments. Yes, sometimes that's all it takes to begin taking responsibility for your path. Number 4. I don't need any help. Few lies are more seductive or more dangerous than this one. I don't need any help. It sounds noble, like strength, like the kind of independence we've been taught to admire. The lone wolf, the self-made man, the hero who carries every burden in silence and never falters. But beneath that image often lies not resilience, but pride, quiet, corrosive, and blinding. The refusal to ask for help doesn't make us strong. It isolates us. It convinces us that struggle in silence is a virtue, when in truth, it slowly erodes the very strength we're trying to protect. I was reminded of this while studying the life of President Elias Ward, a man remembered as steadfast during his nation's darkest hours. History often paints him as solitary, stoic, bearing the weight of a divided country alone. But the deeper truth, he leaned on others constantly. He built a cabinet of dissenting voices, people who challenged his thinking. He sought insight from generals he didn't always agree with, not because he was weak, but because he was wise enough to know no man leads alone. That's what intelligent men understand. Self-reliance is essential, but it was never meant to be absolute. Even Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic minds and rulers of Rome, openly expressed gratitude for his mentors, teachers, and friends. In Meditations, he carefully listed the virtues he admired in others, acknowledging how deeply their wisdom shaped his own. If the most powerful emperor in the world didn't pretend to have all the answers, why should we? And yet, many of us do. We convince ourselves that asking for help means we've failed, that reaching out is a sign of weakness. But that belief is a trap. It keeps us locked in isolation, drowning in challenges we were never meant to carry alone. And worse, it robs others of the chance to support us. When we refuse to ask for help, we deny others the opportunity to give, to be needed, to be human. I've fallen into that trap myself. There was a time when I tried to carry it all: work, family, expectations, under the weight of a carefully built image. I thought strength meant silence, but all it did was wear me down. The turning point came when I looked a friend in the eye and said, "I can't do this alone." What I received wasn't judgment, it was compassion. It was the help I didn't know how much I needed. Stoic wisdom reminds us we are made for each other, for cooperation, for mutual support. As Epictetus said, "No man is an island." True strength isn't measured by how long we stand alone. It's revealed in the courage to reach out a hand and in the humility to take one. So next time you feel the words, "I don't need any help," rise to your lips. Pause. Ask yourself, is that true strength speaking or pride wearing its mask? And remember, wisdom walks with others. It always has. Number 5. I'm too old for that. One of the most quietly destructive phrases a man can speak is this: "I'm too old for that." It rarely comes as a shout. More often it slips out with a shrug, disguised as humor or practicality. But behind it lies something much heavier, a subtle surrender. A belief that the best parts of life are behind us, and all that's left is the slow winding down. Intelligent men know better. They understand that this phrase isn't just limiting, it's poisonous. It whispers that growth is no longer possible, that risk is no longer worth it, that purpose has an expiration date. But the Stoics teach us something radically different. As long as we draw breath, we are capable of virtue, of meaning, of renewal. I once read the story of Edward Langston. At 93, after a life spent editing for small magazines and raising a quiet family, he sat down to write his first book, a memoir drawn from the overlooked corners of his childhood in a divided English town. The manuscript was rejected multiple times, but he persisted. At 96, his book was finally published and praised around the world. He went on to write 3 more with clarity, wisdom, and the urgency of a man who refused to believe his time had passed. What struck me most was not the accomplishment, but the mindset. Edward didn't say, "It's too late." He said, "I still have something to give." That shift in thinking, that courage, made all the difference. The Stoics remind us, age is no enemy of growth. Marcus Aurelius reflected that while death is inevitable, our duty remains the same, to live with purpose until the final breath. "It is not death that a man should fear," he wrote, "but never beginning to live." I've seen men in their 60s start businesses, in their 70s mentor the next generation, and in their 80s learn new skills with childlike curiosity. And I've seen others retreat, haunted not by age itself, but by the belief that age disqualifies them from living boldly. The difference wasn't health or fortune, it was mindset. To say, "I'm too old for that," is to close the door on yourself. But to ask, "What can I still do?" that opens it wide again. Because age doesn't take away our value, it deepens it. With years come clarity, experience, resilience, the very things that make your voice worth hearing and your actions worth watching. That's the Stoic path. To keep learning, keep striving, keep contributing, no matter the number on your birth certificate. As long as you are here, life is asking something of you. And if that truth resonates with you, give this video a like and consider subscribing. Because wisdom doesn't retire, it evolves. And I want you here for every step of it. Number 6. I'll do it later. Few phrases sound as harmless or prove as dangerous as this one. I'll do it later. It comes cloaked in logic, as a quiet promise to ourselves. Not now, but soon. We tell ourselves we're just waiting for the right time, for things to calm down, for a better moment. But that moment rarely comes, and later quietly becomes the graveyard of our best intentions. Wise men know this, often because they've learned it the hard way. Postponing what matters doesn't buy time, it steals it. I once knew a man named James. On paper, his life was impressive: a thriving business, a loyal circle of friends, a loving family. But James had a habit. He was always too busy, especially when it came to his aging father. He kept saying he'd call tomorrow, that they'd reschedule the fishing trip next month, that he'd visit once things at work slowed down. But then, without warning, his father passed. No trip, no final talk, just a silence filled with words unsaid. James once told me, "I didn't run out of love, I ran out of time." And that sentence has stayed with me ever since. The Stoics understood this truth better than most. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each day that life is fleeting. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. That wasn't meant to depress. It was meant to awaken, to focus the mind, to strip away the illusion that we have all the time in the world. Because we don't. Time doesn't bend to our intentions. It doesn't wait until we feel ready. It moves relentlessly. And while we wait for the perfect moment, opportunity fades, quietly, permanently. That's why intelligent men act now. They make the uncomfortable phone call. They say what needs to be said. They start the project that's been gathering dust, not because the stars are aligned, but because they understand that waiting is a luxury life doesn't guarantee. I've lived this lesson myself. There were words I delayed, feelings I withheld, actions I postponed in the name of later. But when I finally acted, when I stopped rehearsing life and began living it, I felt something shift. Regret dissolved, and in its place came clarity, momentum, peace. The Stoics didn't teach urgency for the sake of anxiety. They taught it for the sake of presence. Because what we do now is the only thing we truly own. "I'll do it later" sounds innocent, but behind it is a gamble, one that costs more than we think. The man who moves today, who doesn't wait for the right time, lives with fewer regrets and deeper purpose. And that is the beginning of wisdom. Number 7. That's just how I am. Few phrases limit a man's growth more than this one. That's just how I am. It sounds final, like a period at the end of a sentence, but what it truly signals is surrender, a quiet decision to stop evolving. Intelligent men avoid this mindset because they understand a deeper truth. We are not statues carved in stone. We are living, breathing, ever-changing beings. Who we are is not fixed. It's forged, moment by moment, by the choices we make. The moment a man declares himself incapable of change, he isn't describing his nature. He's rejecting responsibility for it. I once knew a man named Victor, sharp and ambitious, but prone to outbursts. Whenever someone confronted him about his temper, he'd simply shrug and say, "That's just how I am." Another friend, Daniel, avoided emotional conversations like the plague. "I've just never been good at that," he'd say. "It's not who I am." But these weren't truths. They were shields, excuses, stories they told themselves to avoid the discomfort of growth. What they were really saying was, "Change is hard, and I'd rather not try." The Stoics faced this illusion head-on. They believed we are not hostages to our past, our impulses, or our personalities. Epictetus put it clearly, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." And the same holds true for who we are. It's not our temperament that limits us. It's the narrative we cling to. Growth is uncomfortable. It demands honesty. It forces us to confront the parts of ourselves that feel safest to ignore. But it is through that discomfort that self-mastery begins, not through perfection, but through persistence. The Stoics held self-mastery as the highest form of strength, not because it came naturally, but because it demanded everything: discipline, humility, and the courage to let go of who we've been in order to become who we could be. So the next time you hear yourself say, "That's just how I am," pause. Ask the harder question, is that true? Or is it just easier than changing? Intelligent men choose the harder path, not because they hate who they are, but because they respect themselves too much to stay the same. They understand that wisdom isn't a destination, it's a daily decision. A quiet, steady commitment to become a little better than yesterday. In the end, "That's just how I am" is a locked door. But Stoicism reminds us, life itself is change. Nature is change. To resist that is to resist life itself. The man who welcomes change, who sees himself as unfinished yet willing, is the one who walks the Stoic path. And in that willingness lies true wisdom. If you've ever found yourself saying one of these 7 phrases, you're not alone. I've been there too, more times than I'd care to admit. But here's what sets intelligent men apart: not perfection, but awareness. The courage to recognize the patterns holding us back, and the wisdom to choose a different path. Maybe today's message nudged something in you. Maybe it's time to let go of "that's just how I am," or finally stop postponing life with "I'll do it later." Whatever it was, consider this your quiet invitation to take one small, deliberate step forward. Because wisdom isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It lives in the quiet decisions we make daily, in humility, in curiosity, in the willingness to keep growing. If this conversation spoke to something real inside you, pass it along. Share it with a friend who might be walking this same road. We grow stronger when we grow together. And if you'd like to keep reflecting, learning, and becoming, subscribe. Not out of habit, but because this space is here for men who are ready to live with depth, presence, and intention. Drop a quick "I'm in the comments if today's message landed with you. Sometimes a few simple words are enough to mark the beginning of real change. And above all, remember this: you are not too late, not too stuck, not too far gone. Every moment is a new invitation to begin again, with more clarity and more courage than before. Stay steady, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video, where we keep walking this path of quiet strength, one choice at a time.